Today we're going to talk about the history of the gold rush. This is our August 2021 Senior Library Program, and it is brought to you by the Outreach and Extension Department of the Tiffin-Seneca Public Library. Gold. So why do we value gold? Well, gold itself doesn't have any intrinsic value. Gold only has value because we as a society decides that it does. Of all the elements on the periodic table, only a few can easily be used as currency. This is due to the nature of the elements. For currency, you need an element that is easily melted into coins or bars or jewelry. You also need an element that does not rust or corrode easily. It's got to be scarce, but not impossibly rare. And so that leaves just one metal, gold. Silver tarnishes. It reacts with tiny amounts of sulfur in the air. That's why we place particular value on gold. It turns out that the reason gold is precious is precisely that it is so chemically uninteresting. So scarcity and stability aren't the whole story. Gold has another quality that makes it a standout contender for currency in the periodic table, and that is gold is golden. Gold is very distinctive, and gold is unbelievably beautiful. The demand for gold can vary, and the price of gold fluctuate. So in 1973, Richard Nixon decided to stop the US dollar's tie to gold. So since then, every major currency has been backed by no more than the legal authority that the law of the land says you must accept it as payment. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the California gold rush. And at first, we're going to talk about the lasting effects of the gold rush, outcomes and innovations, and negative outcomes. So the California gold rush created a lasting impact on the U.S. economy by propelling significant industrial and agricultural development. The increased investment in the emerging California economy would have a lasting impact on both California and the United States. In fact, many scholars and theorists have drawn parallels between the spirit of the gold rush and the ongoing technological and entrepreneurial boom experienced in the Silicon Valley. Understanding the geopolitical, economic, and social effects of such movements in the United States are key to helping the U.S. understand our future. Because of the California gold rush, the famed Pony Express was created to send mail and parcels from California to the Midwest within a 2-week period using ponies. So when everyone migrated to California, they still wanted to keep in touch with their relatives back across. So that's how the Pony Express was created. Another major outcome of the gold rush was the rapid development of agriculture due to the increased demand and availability of more sophisticated tools. In fact, many who did not succeed in mining turned to California's green gold, taking full advantage of the state's favorable climate to produce massive amounts of fruits, vegetables, and grains in order to feed the mining communities. Immigrants from Europe also saw an opportunity to satisfy demands for wine. They planted the first orchards and vineyards, and soon they were not only supplying locally, but also exporting to other countries. California wines remain some of the most sought after and regarded wines to this day. California-based businesses weren't the only ones benefiting from the gold rush, as foreign producers and manufacturers found new markets for their products in the United States. The gold rush led to a revolution in transportation as well. New roads, bridges, ferries, wagons, and steamships were created to help prospectors reach California, which was fairly isolated at the time. The gold rush was not beneficial to all, though. Before European settlers arrived in California, an estimated 300,000 native people lived and thrived in small villages throughout the area. Because of the gold rush, increased violence happened against Native Americans, tens of thousands of whom are estimated to have lost their lives in clashes with settlers. By 1870, an estimated 30,000 Native Americans remained in the state of California, most on reservations without access to their homelands. Later on, immigrants from China often experienced intense discrimination. During the 19th century, China struggled economically, and thousands of young Chinese men migrated to California in hopes of earning enough money to support their families back home. Some Americans, convinced that these Chinese immigrants were taking revenue and employment opportunities away from other Americans, pushed to place restrictions on Chinese immigration and to create a tax on all foreign miners working in California. The gold rush also had severe economic impacts. Rivers became clogged with sediment, forests were ravaged to produce timber, biodiversity was compromised, and soil was polluted with chemicals from the mining process. So let's go ahead and talk about the California gold rush and how it got started. The California gold rush was sparked by the discovery of gold nuggets and flakes in the Sacramento Valley in the early 1848, and was arguably one of the most significant events to shape American history during the first half of the 19th century. As news spread of the discovery, thousands of prospective gold miners traveled by sea or over land to San Francisco and the surrounding area. By the end of 1849, the non-native population of the California territory was some 100,000, compared to the pre-figures in 1848 of less than 1,000. A total of $2 billion worth of precious metal, more than 750 pounds of gold, was extracted from the area during the gold rush, which peaked in 1852. So the discovery at Sutters Mill. On January 24th, 1848, James Wilson Marshall, a carpenter originally from New Jersey, found gold in the American River at the base of the Sierra Nevada mountains near Coloma, California. At the time, Marshall was working to build a water-powered sawmill owned by John Sutter, a German-born Swiss citizen and founder of what would later become the city of Sacramento. As Marshall later recalled of his historic discovery, "It made my heart thump, for I was certain it was gold." Though Marshall and Sutter tried to keep the news of the discovery under wraps, word got out. And by mid-March, at least one newspaper was reporting that large quantities of gold were being turned up at Sutter's Mill. Here's some pictures of Sutter's Mill and a picture of a pan of gold flakes there. Gold fever really climbed when President James Polk announced the positive results of a report made by Colonel Richard Mason, California's military governor, in his inaugural address. The accounts of the abundance of gold are such of an extraordinary character as would scarcely command belief were they not corroborated by the authentic reports of officers in the public service. Though the initial reaction in San Francisco was disbelief, Sam Brannan set off a frenzy when he paraded through town displaying a vial of gold obtained from Sutter's Creek. and announced his mining supply store open for business. By mid-June, some 3/4 of the male population of San Francisco had left town for the gold mines, and the number of miners in the area reached 4,000 by August. So there would be some of the supplies he would have in his store. Throughout 1849, people around the United States, mostly men, borrowed money, mortgaged their property, or spent their life savings to make the long and dangerous journey to California. In pursuit of the kind of wealth they had never dreamed of, they left their families and hometowns. In turn, women were left behind to take on new responsibilities, such as running farms or businesses, or caring for their children alone. To accommodate the needs of the 49ers, gold mine towns had sprung up all over the region, complete with shops, saloons, brothels, and other businesses seeking to make their own gold rush fortune. Most of the 49ers of the gold rush traveled by sea, which offered the safest and fastest way to get there, but took 4 to 5 months sailing around the southern tip of South America and up the West Coast. Travel companies offered tickets across the United States along with the California Trail or Oregon Trail. And other wagon routes opened up to accommodate the 49ers. Shipwrecks, accidents, sicknesses, and diseases all plagued the routes to California. People came from around the world to pan for gold. Many came from Hawaii, Peru, Chile, Mexico, Europe, and the Philippines, as well as Australia, Turkey, and China. In 2 years, San Francisco went from 1,000 full-time inhabitants to 25,000. About 90,000 gold seekers arrived in 1849. 60,000 of them were Americans. By 1855, more than 300,000 settlers had arrived. There's some pictures of the 49ers and some gold mining equipment that they might use. The effects of the gold rush were substantial. Whole indigenous societies were attacked and pushed off their lands by gold-seeking 49ers. The gold rush undoubtedly sped up California's admission to the Union as the 31st state. In late 1849, California applied to enter the Union with the Constitution that barred slavery, provoking a crisis in Congress between those for slavery and those against slavery. Sutters Mill fails. So ironically, the gold rush actually harmed the man who had begun it. Sutters Mill quickly failed when all of the able-bodied men in the area turned all their efforts to search for gold. Squatters looking for gold overran Sutters' property. They trampled his fields, slaughtered his herds for food, and consumed all of his crops. Until his death in 1880, he spent his time unsuccessfully petitioning the government to compensate him for his losses he suffered as a result of the gold rush he unintentionally ignited. Probably less than half of the seekers found gold and made a modest profit. A few struck it rich, but thousands died in the basically lawless mining towns and on the prairies. After 1850, the surface gold in California largely disappeared. Mining was difficult and dangerous labor, and striking it rich required good luck as much as skill or hard work. As gold became more and more difficult to reach, the growing industrialization of mining drove more and more miners from independence to wage labor. Hydraulic mining developed in 1853, and that brought enormous profits, but destroyed much of the region's landscape. Though gold mining continued throughout the 1850s, it had reached its peak by 1852, when some $81 million worth of gold was pulled from that ground that year. After that year, the total take declined gradually, leveling off at around 45 million per year by 1857. Settlement in California continued, however, and by the end of the decade, the state's population was 380,000. Dams designed to supply water to mining sites in the summer altered the course of rivers away from farmland, while sediment from the mines clogged others. The logging industry was then born. So we'll talk a little bit here about the logging industry from 1848 to the 1850s. It was difficult to imagine the development of Seattle and the rest of Washington without the presence of the logging industry. It didn't take long for the California gold rush to expose the need for a steady, good supply of lumber. Many forests were nearly destroyed by careless practices during those years. Logging was a dangerous profession. Death and dismemberment rates were high. Sustainability was not even a word in the 1800s. The first lumbermen who operated cut down anything they could get their hands on, limiting only by the problem of transportation into the interior of the land. Soon, the ugly sights of cleared cut forests and muddy hills were commonplace. Some pictures of some of the loggers. And this is a very interesting picture. Here at the top, you see 1620. About 50% of the United States was covered in forests. 1850, you see a lot less, especially around the East Coast where we had settled. And then here, 1920. 1920, you see here, less than 9% forests. Some more pictures of the deforestation. Forest fires were rampant. A few were even lit by locals to celebrate important events as a type of festivity. More trees were burned down than cut down over the first few decades of logging, and it was commonplace for Seattle and Tacoma to be covered in a haze of smoke that wafted from the surrounding hills. Ships navigating the strait with loads of timber sometimes found themselves unable to see more than a few feet into the horizon. One of the worst fires occurred in 1902. The Yakult burn is what it was called. Starting between Mount St. Helens and the Columbia River, it burned over 200,000 acres and killed over 30 people. 12 billion board feet of timber were also lost during that time. On January 3rd, 1900, the timber industry in Washington underwent one of the biggest changes in its history. On that day, Midwest lumber tycoon Frederick Weyerhaeuser purchased 900,000 acres of land from the Northern Pacific Railroad in the largest private land transaction in American history. To that point in time, he paid $6 an acre. Mr. Weyerhaeuser's company soon drafted a workers' compensation law, which was implemented in 1911. The amount of area that was placed under federal protection was increased drastically. 7.4 million acres were protected in federal reserves by 1905. Seeking to reduce the threat of wildfires and the resulting losses, the Weyerhaeuser Company worked with the U.S. Forest Service head to shape forestry management for years to come, creating forest patrols, a state forest commission, burn permitting system, and a school of forestry at the University of Washington. Clear-cutting forests was the accepted practice in the early 1900s, But that didn't stop the company from dabbling with the idea of sustainable forestry. Weyerhaeuser realized that its greatest asset was not lumber, but the forest soil and the amazing reproductive power of trees. To that end, the company unveiled its Timber as a Crop campaign in the 1930s, and the catchy slogan eventually became a way to do business. So additionally, the practice of total deforestation was largely replaced with the selective harvesting of commercially viable trees from a given area. So the Yukon Gold Rush goes from 1893 to 1896, and that's the last section we'll talk about. So hoping to cash in on reported gold strikes in Alaska, George Carmack had traveled there from California in 1881. After running into a dead end, he headed north into the isolated Yukon Territory, just across the Canadian border. While salmon fishing near the Yukon River in Canada's Yukon Territory on August 16, 1896, George Carmack reportedly spots gold nuggets in a creek bed. His lucky discovery sparks the last great gold rush in the American West. News of the gold strike spread fast across Canada and the United States, and over the next 2 years, as many as 50,000 would-be miners arrived in that Yukon region. Here's some pictures of them. So the Klondike fever reached its height in the U.S. in mid-July 1897, when 2 steamships arrived from the Yukon in San Francisco and Seattle, bringing a total of more than 2 tons of gold. For his part, Carmack became rich off his discovery, leaving the Yukon with $1 million worth of gold. Many individual gold miners in the Yukon eventually sold their stakes to mining companies who had the resources and machinery to access more gold. Large-scale gold mining in the Yukon Territory didn't end, though, until 1966. And by that time, the region had yielded some $250 million in gold. Today, some 200 small gold mines still operate in that region. So we'll talk about that a little bit. If you've ever seen the TV show Gold Rush, it's on the Discovery Channel, and it's been out for 11 seasons. You can follow the lives of ambitious miners as they head north in pursuit of gold. With new miners, new claims, new machines, and new ways of pulling gold out of the ground, the stakes are higher than ever. But will big risks lead to even bigger payout? You'll have to watch to see. We also have some movies that are about this time period and about gold mining, as well as maybe those territories, California, Texas, kind of around the time of the Civil War. And we will be doing a yarn bird craft. For this, we need some leftover yarn. You may have a little bit of yarn left over from maybe a knitting project you had done, or some yarn that was sitting around. You'll need 3 different colors. You'll need some buttons for the eyes, or you could also use some googly eyes. Maybe some orange pom-poms for the nose, or you could use some felt, or you could also use an orange button for the nose if you wanted to. Scissors. You'll need a piece of cardboard, and you'll need it about 10 inches long or 25 centimeters. And you will also need some hot glue or some tacky glue to help put on your eyes and your nose. So that's all I have for you. I just wanted to remind you of all the resources we have here at the library. We have some great movies about gold mining or around that time period. We have great books as well. This is a large print book we have. It's new. It's called Stampede, Gold Fever, and Disaster in the Klondike. We have lots of nonfiction informational books, especially in the juvenile section, about different things like westward expansion or the gold mine, Oregon Trail, things like that. It's a nice juvenile book called Gold Rush Girl in the J fiction section, as well as some interesting adult books as well. We have The Fall in here, and a classic movie, Road to Utopia. In the juvenile section, this is called You Choose series. So you get to, it's kind of an interactive adventure where you get to choose the ending. There's like 14 endings, 24 choices. It's called The California Gold Rush. We also have a new book here, Dirty Gold. So all of those resources and movies, as well as the ones I talked about earlier, are available at your library. If we do not have them in at the time, you can place holds for them. And we will be making these cute little yarn birds in our craft next. Thank you. Today we're going to do our outreach craft, and we are going to make these cute little yarn birds that I have here. So in order to make these yarn birds, we need 3 different colors of yarn. You need some buttons, or maybe even some googly eyes, and you need some kind of a nose. So for the nose, you could use maybe an orange button or an orange pom-pom, like these. For the eyes, I use black buttons, and then I put these little googly eyes and glued them on top of the button. You will also need 3 different color yarns. These can be leftover yarns. Maybe you have some leftover yarn. You just need enough to wrap around this piece of cardboard. So this piece of cardboard you see here is 10 inches in length or 25 centimeters, and you will need one of these. So your first step would be to go ahead and take your yarn, and you're going to place it right on the cardboard, and you're going to wrap it around 40 times like this. So when you're done, you have your yarn on here, and you will cut both of the ends so that you have a nice little pile of yarn. And you will do that with each of the colors. So when you wrap it around 40 times, you'll come here and you'll cut this side and you'll cut the other side with your scissors. And you will have your 3 piles of yarn. You will also need, I guess, some tacky glue as well, or some hot glue. So your next step would be to take one of your yarns and lay it down, and you're going to take the other yarn and lay it across, like a cross there. And then you're going to take, actually I'm going to borrow one of the strings of the one color and one of the strings of the other color. And we are going to twist them like this. And then you are going to tie each end. So I'm going to tie the green end, and I'm going to tie the white end. I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and I'm going to try to keep it nice and flat and even when I try to tie it. Okay, so the green end is tied, and I'm going to go ahead and gather up the white end and tie it. Okay, so once you get these 2 sides like this, and they're both secured and tied, you're going to go ahead and you're going to place your next pile onto here. We will do that next. Okay. So you're going to tie your last grouping of yarn right in the middle. You're going to tie them together. just like this. And you're going to place it right in the middle there. You're going to take your third color and you're going to place it in between the two other colors. And you're just going to kind of work them around and fold them around. And you're going to shape them into your bird. You'll have to kind of fluff it around and stuff, but basically this is what it kind of looks like. You have one color in the back, you have the middle sides, and then you have the front here. And then your next step will be, when you get them all situated, is you're going to get some yarn and you're going to tie around it. So you can pick whatever color of the three colors you want to tie around it, but you're going to basically wrap it around and you're going to tie these together. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I have my bird here, the shape and the body of it, and now you want to trim the excess that is here. So you're going to go ahead and trim all that up with your scissors. You probably want pretty sharp scissors to go ahead and do this. These scissors are not the sharpest, but go ahead and use them. And you might have to kind of pull at a few of the strands, especially if you find a loose one up here, and you can just kind of push it and tuck it in with your scissors. For the most part, that's what this is going to look like. You can kind of trim and finesse it a little bit by just twisting it around and trimming the sides up here. So I have my bird here, all nice and secured, and I'm going to go ahead and glue on its nose, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue on two of the eyes. Okay. So my bird here now has his nose glued on. He has two buttons glued on for his eye, and we went ahead and put these little googly eyes and glued them on as well. So he is all finished. If you want to put them in a little basket, around a little nest like this, you can, however you want to use them to decorate. But that is our fun little yarn bird craft. And this is a great thing to do if you are somebody who knits and has leftover yarn, or know somebody who has leftover yarn and you don't know what to do with a little bit of yarn left over. Well, you can make something cute, like a little craft, like this yarn bird craft. So thanks for joining us.